Well, I would like to first apologize for Sasha and yourself, because I have to leave this session now. But I will watch it in the recording. Yes, it works. I know. Well, I would like to introduce to you Alexander Nikolaevich Arkhangelsky, where we don't need to introduce you all, because this is our Russian star of Russian television, who's never even in Georgia. He's a great friend of ours, and he's a close friend of the school, and I would put it, it's ideological component. And I want to say that some 10 years ago, Sasha was deputy editor-in-chief of the newspaper Izvestia, that was very much unlike what it was in Soviet times, but it still retained, I wouldn't call it, it was like a newspaper, which many people read, and former Soviet people read a lot, and the very combination, the name of the newspaper, sent us back to, because Izvestia, even in Soviet times, it still retained its professional properties. There were many texts there that were really drafted and written in the professional manner. And when Sasha worked there, and when some friends of ours and one of the alumni of the school, they came up with this 2-page text where they wrote something like this about the school, and they said, "A citizen Nemirovskaya." And right now I realized that as I walked up about this means, "Madam Nemirovskaya, please follow me." Well, this is something what they can say now, but it was quite simple at that time, and I thought, what a transformation we all went through, and how is it that we really allowed this to happen? So that to turn, like Lyosha is adding, to quite a different title, but the school and Sasha, as I see it, well, we have no choice, no way out, and we have to withstand what ordeals we face. Withstand this test of time. Sasha was an excellent representative Russian intelligentsia who wrote textbooks and continues to write so, but not only historic books, but also takes part very actively in the ideological life, and he was one of the first to translate himself, sort of converted himself into internet capacity, and I'm known, he has 1,000 fans and readership. And I remember, like, Sasha had a position that is very important, and which, as I think, historically is correct. He was speaking about corporate ethics. He was saying that we need to start a dialogue. He was saying that how important it is for the culture for us. And within him, there always was a man, when he gave him a gift, a book on Alexander I. And at that time, I looked at it with the very pleasant words that he wrote. I said, "What is it? Who is he, Alexander I?" I just still recall something, because I went to school, what Alexander I was like. He says, "He was a bastard." I said, "What do you mean a bastard? Rascal." I remember what it was like. He says, "Yes. He was raised, and his grandmother wanted him to carry out reforms in Russia, and he was a coward, he didn't do it. So this Sasha, he's a reformer. He tried to find in practice and in real life and in his profession a way to find dialogue, to start dialogue. I listened to his very latest presentation at our I class. For some reason, he was not incriminated to us in this Nemo where we are considered to be foreign agents. Probably he did not analyze the choices, maybe this. But I listened to him twice. He still remained the same person and professional whose activity is unimaginably high. But he is saying very precisely and there's hope that remains is for each of us, how we shall remain in the space that is given to us, how we shall carry these values and societal argument which some of us want to hold. And this is where the focus from this cultural community to us, and I find it close, my friend. Thank you very much. Thank you for being like a TV star, for being modest, a modest expert of the modest assembly in this school. Thank you. Well, stars have a very simple signature sign. They can't use the metro, and I do, and I'm very happy about it. Good evening to everybody. Probably I will not deliver a lecture. I will share my, deliberation, contemplations.
Которые меня мучают, я уверен, что многих из вас, как профессионалов,
Because the problems that I face, I'm sure you are facing the same, and probably the answers that I'm looking for will be probably very close to you, since you're raising very much the same questions. Well, what I've been doing all my life, I've been doing something that has to do with culture education and media, multimedia and other things. And I recall this question which was asked by Taras Bulba to his son Andrei. Well, my son, did your Polacks help you? Actually, if you look at and recalculate what I've been doing, whatever I've been doing, it all ends in collapse. Well, Izvestia newspaper, which Lena referred to, where we, with myself and Georgy Georgievich Boft, sat next door, as we were in charge each of our own area. We're both deputy editors-in-chief. And where is it now? Yeah, well, it certainly exists. But when they call me, I do not respond. Do not give the answers, because it's below my idea about things that are permitted. Moreover, I'm quite a person who can be easily talked into anything. And really, I would. But some people who worked for Izvestia, I banned them, because from my perspective, and I do not impose it, the last street which you cannot cross, this is when you are reporting somebody to the authorities. There was a very interesting period, and when we were building something and nothing worked out. Okay. And, I'm doing the project, the prize to the Enlightenment. We did it together with Dmitry Zimin, and I've been doing it for 7 years. Well, certainly. And it's not that it should be rising in, or not just like the light of intelligence should be going across the country. No, so that we do not go back to cave-like mentality. Rational ideas about the world we live in. Well, certainly not. But another prize that just as a project, Polit Prasvet, it has to do with journalism. Well, quite clearly, that one of the makers of this, Boris Zimin Younger, raised the question, can we at all imagine this prize in Germany of 1938? I told him we're not yet in 1938.
31.
But it's not 1931. And what we are awarding, there was a nomination that will no longer be. We mostly awarded those who are not with us anymore. Lenta.ru, I will not dwell, not to be an ill prophet for their fate. Okay, what? And some people leave media field or change their owner. I work on school textbooks and literature, and we're finishing together with my alumnus with whom she has an Orthodox gymnasium image from grades 5 to 9, and it seemed to us that we're doing something good because she's so conservative and I'm so liberal, and it's very important for the school so that we stand in each other's way to go beyond some line, because the school cannot be to suit only the liberal, only the conservative kids. We're trying to sort of contain one another's aspirations, but this is where all of a sudden people from the State Duma, it occurred to them that there can be not many textbooks, that it stands in the way of starting. Well, about history I can understand the motives, but literature I cannot understand the motives. What does it mean? One and only textbook in literature. It means that we know how to correctly interpret some works of art, and all the school children, they require only one. But literature, it's not interesting when it has final sort of interpretation. Are we reading books to make the right conclusions? No. Let alone Russian literature. In Russian literature, in this sense, all the rules are violated even in a fable. Look, what are fables for? Let us show the shortcomings of people and make brief conclusions so that people should remember it and stop doing it. The most known Russian fable is which? The Crow and the Fox. It does not end in a conclusion. No, it begins with it. And if you look at it, the fable seems senseless, like how many times it was told to the world that if somebody flatters to you, they will always find a key to your heart. Then why is it that we're trying to change things? We do not want to. Fable is not about changing the world. Fables are about, well, relations between the crow and the fox. So this picture is more important than the conclusion. At that, and who is pushing this project now in Duma? They've introduced an amendment. Since we have a law on education, it forbids and refuses, it disallows it disallows to have only one textbook. And now an amendment that makes 3 exceptions of language, literature and history. Well, with language I understand it's a matter of rules, whether they change or not, but certainly who is making these amendments? Irina Yarovaya, who is in charge of the Committee on Security. Ira Yarovaya will remember her after Petropavlovsk-Kamchatsky, where she was in charge of Open Russia, and she was receiving us there. Franz Kalintsevich, Deputy Chairman, Committee for Defense. And so there's not one single representative from the Committee on Education. Well, there's not one single, just quite, somebody understands Irina Konstantinovna Rodnina, but she's an athlete training. She knows, she worked hard in educating the younger generation, but this is where there's no textbooks in sport. So who will be stronger? If you look at the journalism method, then they will be stronger. It doesn't have any questions. No matter what you write, you will continue writing. The intrigue, yes, you can do something about it, but about journalism methods. No, they do not work here. The wave that we are rising, it seems to be absolutely falling to small drops as it clashes with a stone. So if using non-journalist methods by, say, taking part in intrigues, maybe you can evolve with some strategy. I no longer hold these illusions anymore. I'm just continuing to attend these meetings when I was telling you. But yes, it makes sense that people may be quite all right, maybe normal. We're just like a month and a half ago, Natalia Dmitrievna Solzhenitsyn, we flew, and Kushner and Serezha Volkov from School 57, we traveled to Chelyabinsk, where the Procurator's office began to destroy one of the best regional lyceums of physics and mathematics, and they opened criminal prosecution against the headmaster. Can you imagine what the situation works like with the Minister of Healthcare, where the widow of the writer and two public figures have to talk so that the governor should understand that it doesn't work. Maybe it shouldn't, the prosecutor's office should not be allowed to destroy this school. Well, okay, Lyceum 31 can be saved by sending people, but you can't really travel the country, and so it's almost guaranteed defeat. At that, the state, like, finally, or regrettably, understood what culture is there for. Why am I saying it regrettably? But undoubtedly, for so many years it'd been looking from like top down. There was a famous formula: culture is like swine. There's lots of noise, but there's very little wool you can get off it. Now they understand it, and now the state went into it, because it became clear that the world view that is shaped by culture determines it all in the long run. The motivations for work, political position, yes, if it's not immediately sociologically, are you for this person or against him, but like for the future, it determines the worldview, and the worldview works independently, and it determines it all. As to civil society, well, it didn't reach it yet. At the civic forum led by Kudrin, which we attended for the second year in a row, we have a panel where we discuss issues pertaining to civil society and culture. Well, it's attended by 10 to 15 people, whereas civil society and government, this is where the attendance is 200. So this is where the center of gravity exists for civil society, where the government is, but the center of gravity is where the worldview is. What do we need it for? Now, the state realized that they have a key to open anybody's mind. And this key, a different story how it works, roughly the state doesn't know, but it has an alternative. Civil society is not doing it at all. And moreover, if we look at it carefully, at the state, I suppose it's gone beyond, and its very attention to, don't tell me anything about Minister of Culture. Minister of Culture, even in Italy, they can be very unlike one another, but this understanding of culture that the state, yes, this sort of key, yes, it works. And this is what they need. Moreover, if you look at what matters for the state and for its leaders, what is of fundamental importance, it's not economy. What matters, it's not even politics. It's now symbols. And more important than politics, than economics, than pragmatism. And this is where I'm somewhat consoled here with the great skepticist, whom we consider an optimist, Alexander Sergeyevich Pushkin, in his tale about fisherman and his wife, analyzed the current political situation. Let's recall it, because it will explain many things. It begins with a man, old man, a fisherman living on the shore. He lives for 33 years. They live very poorly from destitution, and he's catching fish. But they do not suffer because they live in destitution, because this is the way they've lived. They are equal to themselves. And when the golden fish gets caught in this network, what his wife begins with, she changes her economical status. She got an instrument of power in her. And so the first thing she does, she changes her material status. She gets this new a wooden thing to where she washes her clothes. Next step, she changes her social status. She stops being a peasant and becomes a gentry. Not even gentry, but a person of highest nobility. There's exhibition about the Ruri kids. It's not just gentry. This is what the paradoxical about is. Yes, you can become a person of gentry, but you can't become a person of nobility by default. Well, she is fit in, like she's incorporated into history by hindsight, symbolically. The next step, it's a matter of statefulness. She becomes a Tsarina. And what follows is an episode which Pushkin just sketched, but didn't introduce into the final version. She becomes the Roman Pope. And she, well, so much to continue what you just heard. She wears a Latin cap, a Strophilos bird. Yes, Latin monks, and she's writing a Latin hymn. So it means, like, if we disregard this humor, indeed, this is a politologically very exact. First, we try to change our material status, then historic and social status, then matters of government and power, and the next step about sacral things. Who has tools of sacral things? He is in government. And the government that is elevated above czars. And it seems to me that to analyze what period of history we're in today, we are in this period of the Roman Pope. And it all started, irony is now disregarded, it all started on the verge of the 2011-2012, when they brought to Moscow a small part of the belt of Our Lady. Let me put it this way, I'm not really judgmental here. People have the right to experience any feelings. I can, as an Orthodox man, understand and appreciate their feelings, but I do not understand why something that was brought from Greece works, whereas nearby we have Church of Elijah, where another port has always been there, but nobody is much keen to it. But people have the right. Maybe they want to stand in line. It's a sacrifice they want to pay to God, and we don't discuss that. But that was quite typical. There were two lines queuing in Moscow. One queue was to the Church of Christ the Savior, and another to Volkhonka, where there was a grandiose exhibition. Two very distinct queues. And this is when nobody paid attention to the foundation of Vasily the Great standing behind it. It means Konstantin Malafeyev and Vasily Boyko the Great, sort of. No Donbass at the time was around, no Strelkov was not seen anywhere, no question about Crimea was there, but that was already a claim to sacred political power, and we should say that the government felt very tense at the time. I mean, supreme government were very, very tense. They thought that this is a claim by the patriarch, I don't know whose, but some institution for alternative agenda, which is much more serious than Bolotne. Bolotne, they are queuing to Volkhonka. They will not stand longer than, but here people stand in the cold, under the rain for 24 hours. Another thing happened there. Very distinct people stood, but most of them had subconsciously an unexpressed thought. We don't want any intermediates. We want ourselves stand in line and God be there. Not the church, not the state. We don't want them. Give us access to the sacral thing, and you stand aside. And only in the context of this event it becomes clear that strange story about Pussy Riot, that I'm not speaking about that story. And mind you, again, I'm not giving judgments. I'm just viewing as it happens. Which happened after this, and which was given something that was carried the national importance. At that I may notice that this understanding did not come immediately. The church actually did not really, just disregarded them. First they did almost the same thing in Yelochova Cathedral. A week or two they were just, thrown away and sold. First of all, because it's wrong to dance in church. Secondly, there is nothing catastrophical there. Okay, go away. If you don't understand it, go away. Once this happened in Church of Christ the Savior, which is government sort of cathedral, it was judged in a very different matter, not just like hooliganism or as something outrageous, somebody is just like artistic activity, but this was perceived as a crime against attempt to undermine state power, because the matter of sacral characters, they become very, very burning. And that is when it all started and sacral character would be growing. And nowadays I'm not giving my judgment in any way. My first part of presentation of the President to the Federal Address to the Federal Assembly, but if you look at it, all the explanations of what happened to Crimea are not about pragmatic fields. The explanations are even like America was threatening to establish a naval base, not even in the military or political, but in the sacral area. This is our Temple Hill, this is the center of our world, and this is exactly why this matters. Not because the military bases could be put in place, not because this is an outstanding, unsettled question and we do not recognize Budapest Memorandum of 1994. It was not about that. Sacral answer and to the sacral question. And we're certainly in this zone, and this is pretty serious. And this something which destroys all our small projects, all minor strategies, because indeed this cannot be changed. If we're at Pushkin's tale, we remember what it all ends. She wants to become the Tsarina of the seas, and then she returns back to utter poverty, which she started it. But it's different. This is what I'm telling you about. That journalistic methods cannot change it all. And therefore, we are coming close to a very important question, which is you cannot use literature methods, you cannot use history, not journalism. It is stronger than that. The question then is, should we in this case go for journalism if you think that this story is dangerous? And what's the point then? Why do you need to write and to work for it? This is where my answer is very simple. Some things influence the life around us right here and right now. In this zone, it's silly and senseless. If you look from the near future, it makes no sense. And you'd better go for something else. If you look at it as work for the longer perspective, as work that seeks to not to change the today situation, the political situation, but as some work that seeks to shape something new, something different. I would call it like professing the future. Then yes, it makes every sense. And it is educational and cultural journalism which plays key role here because they continue to create hope that the future is open, that it does not lie in the past, that it will be coming near to us. And as to cultural policy, which will be on the 24th of December, promulgated by, I've also attended this working group, nothing very serious there, but no breakthroughs are to be expected there. It is just a normal state document which will make it possible to, well, roughly speaking, Medinsky will not be there. In these wordings that everybody was afraid of, it will not be there.
А при этом совершенно очевидно, что нужно проговаривать постоянно.
And at that, it is important to understand that you should continuously discuss the alternative and cultural policies, not cultural policy, for different regions, for different layers, for different groups, for different areas of work.
Течений мысли. Самое существенное в том, что, чтобы не повторить ошибку гуманитарных.
The most important thing is not to repeat the mistake that was made by the 1960s, who, back in 1968, with a rare exception, stopped foresoothing their future. Instead, they would gather at the kitchens and complain that censorship stands in the way, does not allow them to work. As to the censorship, at the very same time, somewhat later, the economists began to say this future in the way they could. But when history got back and gave a second chance, it turned out the economists have something to say, are ready to come up with the models. They might be imperfect as they are, with horrendous costs, but whereas the humanities could not produce anything, so that we do not find ourselves, history is long and it's surprising, so that we do not find ourselves in a similar situation later on. It's important to speak, to say what the future would hold. I call this project 6 p.m. after the war.
And any war will end one way or the other, and we'll have just to talk and so build new relationship along different lines. So we need to bring out our own concepts, and we'll have to do it again. And I think that this is, and we need to get ready for that. So, and this is salvageable and solvable. We can and doable because we have no way out. So we continue to work, and not because we can change anything right now, but because so the history will evolve in this direction, and so we'll either end up having nothing, or we'll end up at least having something left undestroyed. So now just let's go over to our discussion. Georgi, Alexander, you in your presentation, you started out by identifying so this new, let's talking on someone which is not good. Telling on someone, and but. Then telling on someone, selling someone out. So Leonid Didenko died recently, and so this story about telling on people, and he was young, 48 years. He died young, and during the last year of his life, so he was compiling kind of a dead black list. He was compiling this black list, and so he was the black list of the people who who told on other people, and it turned out that I turned out to be on that list too. And so probably some people deserved it to be on that black list, but I never told anyone and I never betrayed anyone. And so there was an event organized by some local activists dedicated to the situation in Ukraine. And so then those activists of the nationalistic right-wing faction, and I was invited to participate in that event. And I was thinking, should I come and talk or not come? But I decided to come and decided to make us to speak. And my presentation was around the following: so that the majority of the civil society in Russia, unfortunately, is anti-Ukrainian. But we need to try to change it, but we need to do it without any political repressions, and so we should not tighten any screws, and we should not suborn anyone, and we should not suborn anyone. We should not and Leonid regarded my words as a certain kind of attempt to tell on the entire civil society, so betraying the civil society, selling out the civil society. So why did he put me on that blacklist? Why did he do that? I did not know personally Leonid, although I read his articles. And first, because I never compile any lists, and I don't like it. I don't feel like it's necessary, and I think so if a specific person, someone, starts to tell on someone, I strike this person from my list. And for example, someone just publicly, told on someone, and we can always discuss things with Andrei Borisovich. So no one has to agree with him, and so this discussion is a thing of it's a useless thing, but it's a good thing too. A discussion, debate is a good thing, but only if both sides are ready just to yield some ground, and then then debate, good debate makes sense. But if no one just wants to yield his ground, if they're absolutely diametrically opposite and they don't want to budge, it makes no sense. But when I say that this journalist, for example, so he is sucking up to the authorities, and this guy is not sucking up to the authorities, one is liberal and another liberal, and so this one told on everybody else, and this one didn't, etc. And it's just very confusing. So there are no lists, and I hope that will not get to the point when. So, but there are certainly some tragic stories, like in Germany, for example. Then, so one of the persons that failed to go through the identification commission. So then there was a famous philosopher, so who was a friend of Hannah Anya. They even have a philosophical love affair. And I have no answer to this question. So what Germany acquired and what it lost, when Heidegger, who personally never put anyone in jail, and but still he failed to go through this commission, and he fell under this verdict, and he was found guilty for something that he didn't do. I think that we should not be the people who to keep up those lists, because we have other business to do. Okay, Sergey. Sergey Gogin from Ulyanovsk. Today, in the morning, Georgy Goft spoke, and he appealed to the journalists to be more professional, to be more careful, not to use big words, and to learn to read, not only just to read the meaning between the lines, and not to write something that Putin has gone mad, but to find some good some good verse. So then the Aesop language. So then that so is it better just to say that Putin has gone mad, or it's better just to say it between the lines so that you would infer that he's gone mad? You can infer it. Then certainly you have no diagnosis. You cannot possibly make a diagnosis that he's gone mad. So because there are two professions that overlap, but they don't coincide. So journalism. And journalism should not speak Navalny or Putin or anyone or Merkel that they went mad. So certainly, if they got the medical conclusion and so the diagnosis that this guy is mad, okay. So then, but if one politician said about another politician that politician is mad, so this is not serious. So how can you possibly evaluate anyone and so that he's gone mad or not? It's not a medical conclusion. There is no evidence. So it's not. So then there is another profession that journalists that write about burning acute issues, and then he needs to prove that there should be an event that he describes, and this is more hot. Now, and still he should not pass judgment. Should be more circumspect. And besides, and I don't like, the frontal attack. I, as a reader, would hate it, because there is a thin line between cowardice and being careful, because a good journalist should always know. And so then they should be their own editor, and so they should understand what they can say, what they can't. It's a thin line to walk, and so a journalist should not fall into the extremes, and certainly for censorship considerations. So sometimes the journalist cannot say that. So, for example, that your word may be detrimental. And so then you should say, should you utter this word or not? And there was for example, I had this choice once in 2006 when I was standing in front of the church. So then the chief editor just summoned me, and he said that you have to choose. And I was writing the political articles. You either do not write about regional elections, or I will close down your. So I would be happy to write about regional elections, but at the same time I cannot fail not to write about regional elections, because this will be objective. This is what I would reflect what was happened. So how can I fail not to write about that if it happened? And so, because this is my professional choice, this is my professional attitude, I had to cover it. So then I was at the pinnacle of my career, because I was getting good salary on the promise that I won't write anything. Yeah, right. And so that was. But so yes, we'll have to learn to speak in Aesop language. We'll have to learn to speak between the lines. Yes, or we have to. Then we will move to the zone of individual projects. But technologically, you can just leave any media and live independently, autonomously, and say and write whatever you want. And so then it could be, so for example, so then Гражданин poet, citizen poet, so then the project. So then started to live separately, and then the Ksenia Sobchak project is independent now and can live autonomously, independently, and evolving very rapidly, because these two, for example, programs, these two projects are very well developing. But I do not think that they are very serious in what they say. Bryansk, Dennis. My question, which I'm sure everyone wants to ask. So look, in the last time, So there are many people who we thought were reasonable guys. All of a sudden, they displayed themselves as absolutely in a haywire, crazy. So then what we see, the federal channels, not only journalists and some deputies, so it's kind of in mass aggression that is there. So are they doing it out of the goodness of their heart, or they do it for money? So they're very aggressive. So I don't know what difference does it make, for money or because they feel like it. I don't know why they're so aggressive. So this is collective madness happened. I don't know why, because my colleagues Zakhar Prilepin and Shorgunov, they are doing it not for money. Shorgunov and Prilepin, I don't know to what extent it's a game and to what extent it's their convictions, but I can tell you, Zakhar and Shorgunov, not for money. They're not doing it for money, because that's their convictions, and because they do it because they think it's right. That's why they do it. Concerning a large. Vladimir Solovyov, I don't know whether he's doing it for money or out of convictions, but knowing him as a conservative person, conservative political views, I think it's kind of a little bit of both, but it does not go counter to what I heard from him when we were talking in private, off the record, and it does not. It's in consonance. But many journalists think that this is a rhetoric profession. It's just exercise of eloquence. So like Solovyov and Gordon, so when they changed roles, when they quarreled, when they debated during the first, so A, B, so then they changed their positions, and they replaced their positions, and with the same passion and conviction, so they started to debate, to have so this profession provides for a lot of compromise, but it depends on so many incoming values and unknowns, so which are very difficult to put together and figure out the final value of the equation. And so this ambitions, views. It's a quadrant melting pot of this. So this is the profession of a journalist. So there is a bit of everything, yeah. Moscow Oblast, in your presentation you spoke that cultural and educational journalism should come to the fore. But what about the political journalism gives the background to the centralization of power? Because they think that there is no demand for serious political analytical journalism, no demand for that in our society. Right now we see it, we feel it, especially all these talk shows and serious discussions, they went from the prime time, and so usually they take place at night. So what's happening with political journalism today? Was the canvas? I think that no, they've come back actually, and Solovyov used to be at night, but now he is in the evening, so almost every day, every evening, so prime time for Vladimir Solovyov, not because so the channel cannot afford, to produce something that will not be watched. So if it's too late. But political journalism, I was involved in political journalism, but I see no possibility to do it now. If I really want to speak up, I speak. And so in a certain article I speak about that. But what's bad about it, that we all turned into some kind. So because we always make a stand, so we always tell about our position. So, but my reader is not interested what I think about it, because I won't say anything new. So I always I make a stand. So I always come out with a stance. it's like in prison. So when in a cell, so the new guy just comes in and says, say something, 349. You know, that's the number, because all the jokes are numbered, everyone laughs. And I have nothing to say, because you know exactly what I will have to say. My ideas and my points of view and my stand may not be of interest to anyone. So I should just reflect what's happening. So then, pro-state, against the state, and certainly the journalists should change. So then they should be rotated. So new blood should come. And because it's the same people, the same persons, the same anchors, same heads are there all the time, and we need because people do not want just to get the confirmation of my my point of view, but actually I don't want the confirmation of my point of view, but I want to see what the reality is. That's what the listening, what the audience needs. So I continue contributing to papers, but always sympathize with my colleagues who have to do that. So write editorials and write articles, and what Flossberg made in Pskov paper, and so he was the first who said. So he spoke about the military in Ukraine, and Donetsk and Lugansk, who died. Actually, he was the first who spoke about that. And because it was a very important breakthrough, because whatever political position you take, so there is one immutable thing. Because there were some military, yeah. So they're ready to die for the cause, but they want to die in honor. But to die, and then they will not even bury you in honor that you gave your life for your country. So because if for example the war had been declared and the troops would have invaded Ukraine, so then the military would have understood that. But unfortunately, it's neither peace nor war, and so some people are dying there, and it's what. So this is certainly a political and journalist study, and so he paid very high price for that. But this is certainly very, very good, but it's made by one person with great care. And Bashkortostan, since 1996, so the criteria of the development of human potential. What are the criteria of the efficient operation of a journalist, and to what extent the journalist need to be very well educated? So what should be the background? What is the criteria of the efficiency of the operation of a journalist? Thank you. Though I teach at the media design at the higher school of economics, I teach there, but I'm not sure that the journalist education is really an education. Because it's certainly, but to get a bachelor's degree, so to earn a bachelor's degree from any academical discipline, and so to get a good, understanding of things, to get wider, basic, good education, and that's what you need to do, and gives you so different points of view. It gives you wealth of knowledge. Because how can you possibly interview a person if you don't know how the person that you are interviewing takes decisions? So if you don't understand if you don't think out of his head, if you don't understand, so if he's a politician or an engineer or whatever culture, if he's a cultural, you need to think out of his head. You need to know how this decision-making process. Then you can take an interview, and then the society gets an access to all flows of open information, or not. It's not for all journalists, because there is no such thing as independent media, because there are more or less independent exist. But eventually, so when you put it all together, so the main idea is just that we could get that a reader or a viewer could get a more or less comprehensive picture of what happened. That's the whole point. And for example, that's why I'm against only so state media or private media, because the audience has the right to get authentic, objective information, and from different angles. Yeah, so actually, if you play only one trumpet or walk to one drum, march to one drum, it's not good. But when they say that in the West, there is no objective, there's no such thing as objective journalism. It's not there, right? But at the same time, there are different flows of journalism in the West. For example, the Berlusconi. So they give this flow of information, someone else provides another flow of information. There's another channel, regional view, outlook, and so they provide different outlooks, different takes, and different interpretations of certain type of information. Certainly they don't do it objectively, but they do it anyway, and the reader can select. Russia Today. I think that I have nothing against Russia Today, because it's not only Russia Today. There's Russia Today there, and the BBC, and so there are many composed. That I have nothing against Russia Today. So, but who actually has the right over the freedom of speech is the society. It's not the journalist, it's not the power, it's not the authorities, but it's the society. The society should decide what to follow and what to read. Should be provided. But certainly all the complaints about our European media, yeah. Sometimes they are in collusion, sometimes they are conducted, sometimes so they are worked around, and certainly it exists in the media. But there is never an event when there is only one point of view that rules the roost. So like in France, for example, they said, so we knew that your country is a great country, so they were saying, and then so they were talking about the Olympics, they liked it. And then they started to speak very negatively about the annexation of Crimea, and so there's always different viewpoints, and this is normal. But there will be no an ideal, happy medium, objective chunk of information. It just doesn't exist. It's just different interpretations. Good evening, Evgeny, Sevastopol. My question is that Russia now, in Russia, so the work of journalists, so they are put into a certain framework, and so then the boundaries, and in Ukraine it's easier. So these boundaries are murky and blurred, and it's easier for them. And so is it good that the Russian journalists are put in rigid boundaries? And is it good for the civil society development, or bad that Russian journalists work under such strict, limited conditions? So there's no such thing. So that was only bad or only good. It doesn't happen that way. So there are no extremes. So it's just many shades of gray. And the certain negative thing is that we were put in the rigid framework. It's bad, but certainly it's better. It's better so to have bad but free than good but restricted. And so then there a lot of stupidity there, and so the media provides everything. So good things, bad things, hearsay, the truth is mixed with lies, and it's the same. So the different flows of information, and so which all just pours upon the audience, and certainly. So some things are manageable, some non-manageable. So because we saw in Crimea, for example, watching what was happening in Crimea, and so we saw everything. So that's all the thing that was happening from different angles. So what Berkut was doing, and what actually, so the uprising, and so the rebels were doing, and so it was an open picture, the whole gamut from A to Z. And then Vitaly, one journalist came who gave the proper ideological assessment of the situation, and that narrowed down the width of the material. So, but in Ukraine is a very difficult. The economic situation is horrible in Ukraine. Ukraine is in a trap, and the situation is. It turned out to be a gaming area of different players who are not interested in what will happen to Ukraine, but they are playing there. And so one of the advantages of Ukraine is now they are open for the time being, and but they're in a terrible economic situation right now. And that's what, by the way, freedom of speech is one of the few chances that might help them to survive. And there are some, so then the society and each person in separately, so because some cultures, they do not talk about very bad things, but some cultures so speak about everything, the worst, the good and the bad. The good, and the bad, and this is very important. And I think that it's better to speak about things, even if they're horrible and bad and inevitable. I think we need just to talk about everything, because this is my idea. Next question. Vera Andrioki, to follow up on Ukraine. So the journalists love politics now, and so the most recent elections, so many journalists went into politics. And so they were. So then Yaroshenko and Yatsenyuk's lists actually they won. They gained some votes, and so they participated in the elections. Is it good if a journalist decides to become a politician? Is it good? It's nothing specific of Ukraine. It's in any crucial period in the history of any country provides for recruiting politicians from those who are available. So it's about the same period when the deputies of the Supreme Soviet was Alexander Lyubimov and Politkovsky. So they went into politics. Many journalists went into politics, and the intelligentsia, so who realized the gravity of the issue, they went into politics. So that happened. I think that you have the right to once go into politics, but you will never be able to go back to journalism, because it breaks. So then the picture of the world changes in a person's head. So can it be a member of intelligentsia and a good politician? No, you can't. So he can, but he'll never come back. He will never be able to come back. So any intellectual who is involved in it, it's okay. But what he said is irrevocable. He can't come back. Yeah, so he's not a journalist anymore, and cannot go back to journalism because his mindset is different now. Yeah.
So, in that way, a journalist changes his or her occupation forever. Yelena Kutsopina from Bryansk. Do you believe that the cultural figures of culture and writers, artists, should they express in public their civic attitude? Should they participate in formulating the public opinion? Or it is more moral to keep silent, for the people to take decisions that suit them best? Well, I think that I'm quite satisfied with your question, as long as we omit should. I think that this is something that every person decides for himself, and there is no golden rule here, so to say. Those who have a civic attitude or some sort of civic position, they can do it. If it meddles with the person's fine inner adjustment, as they say, he or she must not do it. We often see that musicians or actors who are too rational it may interfere with their art. Many actors have a somewhat irrational view of the world. And in this sense, on the other hand, if a person sets on this path that Zakhar Prilepin has gone into conflict, has sided with the ones, and Andrei Makarevich sided with the others. And whatever my personal position is, but whatever position do I take, it is not possible to. It is not proper to talk and to sing before the opposing side. But he did not sing for them. He sang. He performed in front of the refugees in the Ukrainian territory. And then here in Moscow, in the library yard, he performed in front of the refugees who came to Russia from the Ukraine. So it is in many ways an ethical position. If you've read his blog, Zakhar Prilepin is extremely involved in these events in Donetsk, in Donbass. I think that Zakhar Prilepin is almost like a commissar. Well, he has this right. He's a free artist. He is a Cossack, if you will, a free Cossack, and he does what he wants. Well, once we have come to this threshold, I wonder where is that line and who must take a decision. Let's just say Sasha Morozov and Kostya talked about some sort of responsibility in terms of and such ardor of the likes of Mr. Prilepin is increasingly viewed by many as not a quite proper thing, whereas Mr. Makarevich and Mr. Shevchuk were more peace keeping in nature. We should not hide from ourselves the fact that the texts of Mr. Irgunov and the fiery speeches of Zakhar Prilepin have literally deepened the conflict. No, there is no good answer to your question. Sometimes there is no good answer. First of all, in 1914, World War I erupted. And I'm not willing to compare Zakhar Prilepin with Thomas Mann. Thomas Mann wrote a book which is still not published in Russian, but it hopefully will be published next year. And the meaning of, or the general message of this book is that we should all support this war. And this is an almost a militaristic, belligerent book of this European intellectual. He rethought many of his views later, but at that time this was quite almost a warmongering book. Must we judge him for it? Must we criticize him for that? Well, I think that every person must decide for himself. And as long as a writer does not call for war, I dislike what Zakhar Prilepin does, but he does not call for war. At least I have personally not heard him make direct calls to go to war. The situation that we've found ourselves in is can well be described by the ghetto mentality. The most terrible thing in a ghetto is when people inside the premises surrounded by the barbed wire start to deal with the lists. Every person must have a personal view as to what a person is willing to do or is ready to do. I know what I can do. I can be responsible for myself. That's it. I'm not responsible for Zakhar Prilepin. I'm very much against what he does, but I'm not prepared to say that he is warmongering. Well, with respect to Girkin Strelkov, yes, he is a warmonger and he is a criminal, in my personal view. And we know that Germany had a trial of the Germans who fought on the side of the Islamists in Syria just because they violated the German laws. And I think that Mr. Strelkov, who is also a very persuaded man, I mean, he's a very convinced, almost an ideological man. Eduard Leonov is also a very principled man. He also spent time in jail. But with respect to Zakhar Prilepin, I cannot say that he called for war. The moment he says, let's take up the arms, and go and shoot the Ukrainians, he will become a criminal, in my view. I have not read it in him so far. My position, my personal attitude, I think that the story with Crimea is an annexation, and I shall try to explain why do I think that way. The bad world in Yalta, the bad peace treaty signed in Yalta was that if we can make the agreement. Did Crimea have a right to secede from Ukraine? Definitely. Were there grounds to secede? Definitely. Did the Ukrainians do anything for Crimea to be kept within the Ukraine? No. So, if Crimea had posed the question about the referendum by abiding the norms of the peaceful coexistence, and as a result, the Crimeans would have still decided to secede, I would have said that the 1994 referendum must be renounced. Historically speaking, we have to understand that the arguments, historical arguments, do not work in politics. So in this sense, quoting the Budapest Memorandum of 1994, it is possible, but the transfer of Crimea by Khrushchev is not to be brought up, because the latest document, which was acting, was not the 1954 decision by Khrushchev, but the 1978 Soviet constitution. And this constitution has the names. So the Khrushchev's decision is dubious, but so what two documents can we take up? This is important for the disbandment of the state, and then 1994. Can this be renounced? Yes, it can be renounced if a referendum in Crimea follows the international norms. Kosovo, that Mr. Putin is referring to, I agree with him in terms of the secession. Yes, except for Kosovo did not join any other country. This is what I'm responsible for. This is my position. This is my attitude. With respect to Donetsk and Lugansk, they had reasons, causes for a serious conflict. And, of course, the fact that the people of Malofeev incited this conflict. I do not think that they followed any order, but they did incite the conflict. So, however, I'm not prepared to say that Zakhar Prilepin is a warmonger, because I have not read any direct calls to arms in his texts. Anna Baidakov, Moscow. Alexander Nikolaevich, you have said that in terms of the moral evaluation, every person must make a choice for himself, and I can agree with that. However, we're talking about the image, and you have said that the intellectuals, including the economists and the political scientists, must come to some common ground. Do you believe that the journalists, the cultural figures, artists, should they have a common attitude towards the events around us? Would this be a basis for a future culture? Well, I think that this cannot be realized. I think that for today it is sufficient to recognize the right of your opponent to be your opponent. Once people start to snitch, they can no longer be talked to. As long as there is a difference of opinion, this can be tolerated, of course. You have to talk to your opponents. You have to have a dialogue, as long as they do not snitch, as I said. Up until the law is violated. And this true threshold must not be crossed. And of course, we cannot divide the country where we live into two camps. So we have to mix up. We have to interact. We have to communicate. We have to talk. So no corporate agreements can be signed, but seminars and indeed some events can and must indeed happen for people to continue and talk, even though such talk may sometimes be regarded as empty, futile, or senseless. But as long as there is conversation, as long as there is a dialogue, there's still room for hope. Timur Geraskin from Saransk, alumnus of 2014. Thank you for your very interesting presentation. The regional press has its own specifics. And of course, in this sense, there's a very strong influence on the part of the government. An editor of a newspaper told me a story which may well have happened in any other region of Russia. So that person was called up by the regional government and was reprimanded for what was believed to be poor work. So that man, this editor, has told me that it is, I don't understand. It's curious because I seem to be writing, the right things. Why was I reprimanded? No, you should be, you're praising, but you must be admiring. While you're praising, but you must be admiring. So do you not think that such policies will prevail everywhere on the eve of 2018? Well, you ask for prophecies, but I'm not a prophet. I cannot share any forecasts. I can say that there are things that I hope for, and there are things that I'm afraid of. What I'm most afraid of, what I'm most wary of, is that there are no institutions, no ideas, nothing that would keep the country from sliding into the repressions, into the nightmare of repressions, if these are viewed as necessary. Probably a huge number of people in Russia are ready for the repressions on their inside. So they would support the repressions, including our colleagues, the journalists, including the people in the street. So there is a social, one may say, tacit agreement with the repressive policies by the government. What do I hope for? What could I hope for is that the historical time has well accelerated, and probably the last time when we saw such an acceleration of historical time was on the eve of the perestroika. I'm not saying that there will be another perestroika in Russia. I'm more skeptical about that. I'm rather skeptical about that forecast or outlook, but I think that this is not to come. We have had some sort of a restoration, then a reaction. So we have indeed gone from restoration to reaction. Bribery, I think, will subside because the monies are running dry. The other question is how would the bureaucrats survive without the corruption revenues? But threats are really efficient only as long as you are acting this. But even while Mr. Sechin is no longer having enough money, simply because there is not enough money, we think that the orders proclaimed in May are not to be executed. In most regions of Russia have gone into the budget trap, and most have gone very close to violating the budget rule. Thence follows the subsidized loans, and the profit of next year will have to be used to cover the subsidized loans, and this is what we can. Now, where does this money come from? The devaluation of ruble. We have talked to our colleagues that the devaluation in autumn of 2013 could have helped the situation, but not now. So I think that the corruption, which is a good sign, will go down, but that means that many projects will be closed down, but we will not be made to admire. Yeah. Ekaterina Yeremenko from Irkutsk. Do you believe that those mass media which provoke the government act sensibly? I remember the dismissal of the editor-in-chief of Lenta.ru and the editor-in-chief of Kommersant. So do you believe that the mass media must provoke? Well, the Lenta.ru did not provoke the government. I think that the only framework that the journalist must abide by is the law. If the law is violated, if the law is not violated, then the government should not in any way be too sensitive. Provocation is indeed doesn't mean nothing to me, because indeed the task, the professional duty of every journalist is to make informational provocation, in the sense that a journalist must trouble or indeed agitate the public within the ambit of the law. If one is not ready to abide by these rules, then the court of the law is the only resort. Why is it that the mass media owners are often limited in the world to not to have related business? Because mass media is or may often be used to foster the interests of other businesses. We shall talk about this further with Yelena Panfilova, because the notion of public person is missing in our political discourse, because of which every piece of criticism is regarded as a provocation. So indeed, the Public Person Institute as such is virtually missing, and any information or any criticism is often regarded as an insult. But there is a difference between calumny and criticism. Thank you so much. We shall break for dinner. Bon appetit. We shall resume here at 9 o'clock.